I was around 14 or 15 when this happened, and am female, for anyone who wants to know. There was a park where I used to go whenever I had a row with my parents, which was often. This meant that I could turn up there in the middle of the day or in the middle of the night. There was never any real pattern to it, and nothing weird ever happened before that night. I tended to sit on a bench which was right at the back of the park, by a wooded area, as I didn't want anyone to see me crying. Of course, I realize now how stupid this was, but I was young and really unhappy. It must have been around 9 or 9:30 at this point, and it was just starting to get dark since it was summer. This guy came and sat next to me, which might not have been that weird normally, but he came from the woods rather than from the park. The other odd thing I noticed was that he was wearing a t-shirt, shorts, and black gloves. He might have been around 40 or maybe younger, but I've always been rubbish at reading ages, so I'm not sure. He was about 6'5" and quite stocky, a little bit fat. He asked me what was wrong, which embarrassed me, and I can't remember what I said in response, but it was probably fairly hostile. He then commented that I was really tall. I was about 6'2", and then kind of laughed really creepily and said something like, "I'm bigger though." I always tend to listen to my instincts, and he was reading about a 7 on the Freakometer, so I decided to leave. As I went to stand up, he reached out as though to grab my arm or something. He smiled again, but it was one of those that don't reach your eyes, so you just look creepy. He asked me to go sit back down and tell him what was wrong, but I just said that my dad was waiting for me and that I had to go. He then said that my dad wasn't waiting for me, and that he'd see me walk into the park from the main road by myself. He then told me that liars get punished. I just turned and ran. In those days I was pretty quick, but instead of running in a straight line, I weaved through the playground equipment, figuring it would be harder for a bigger guy to get through the tight spaces. I got to the other side of the park and turned around to see if he was nearby, but he was standing a little by the side, just watching me. There was another guy standing at the edge of the wooded bit. He would have basically been right behind me when I was sitting on the bench. Neither one of them attempted to chase me, and I ran out onto the path that led to the main road. There was a van parked in the car park, but at that point, I didn't connect it with them. When I got out to the main road, it was fairly busy for that time of night, and I stopped running. I decided to go home, but about halfway there I saw the van from the car park on the road behind me. It never attempted to overtake anyone, just continued on the same route I was. I turned off down a road that was near my street, but not actually on it, and after a couple of minutes the van turned down it as well and parked at the top of the road. No one got out, but I could see 2 people inside. I was afraid to go home then, as I thought they'd know where I lived, and my parents often left me on my own as they were neglectful douchebags. I knocked on the first door I saw, and thankfully an old lady answered. She took me inside and called the police. By the time someone came, the van had left. They never caught either of the guys from the park. Not sure how hard they looked, as they hadn't specifically done anything, and I hadn't thought to take a note of the van license plate or anything like that. I still have no real idea what they had planned, or if they were just trying to freak me out, but the gloves in the van make me think it could have ended badly. This story is a little lengthy, so bear with me on this. To give you a little backstory, I live in a small town called Belton in Texas. I'm an 18-year-old guy, and I weigh 195 pounds. I'm 5'6", and I'm a fairly athletic person. I played football in high school, and I know a little martial arts as well, but I always carry a pocket knife on me for work, and if anything happens where I need it. Anyways, This happened about a couple of weeks ago, after I got off work from McDonald's. It was around 12 a.m., and I had to walk home because my mom was out with her friends. Now, my house is about an hour away walking distance, and halfway between there and my house is a park. I stopped at the park because I was tired from work, and I was pretty hungry. After work, I usually take me something to eat. I sat down at one of the park benches and started eating my food when I saw 3 kids playing at the park. All of them were young boys. At the time, I was thinking, man, shouldn't these kids be at home sleeping or something? But I brushed it off and continued to eat my food. I started to get on my phone and was about to start listening to music when I noticed that I didn't hear the kids playing anymore. I looked around and I saw a man talking to them. At first, I thought it was one of the boys' fathers worried about them and was picking them up. But then I got a closer look at the man who was illuminated by streetlights. I saw that he looked kind of dirty and greasy. Focusing on them, I heard the man offering the kids candy and such if they get in his car. My first thought was, oh hell no, I've got to go save those kids. I walked over to them and asked what the guy was doing trying to prey on little kids. He played dumb, but I wasn't buying it. Now that I was face to face with this guy, he was much older looking than I first thought, looking to be in his late 30s or early 40s, 6 feet and a little more muscular than I was. He had a scraggly looking beard and a couple of missing teeth. I again demanded to know what he was doing, and then he said that it was none of my business. I replied that it was if it involved him messing with children. The guy then inches his way towards me, trying to pick a fight, and I immediately pulled out my pocket knife and told him not to think about it. I told him he had 5 seconds to get out of here, or I would shiv his stomach till I was bored. I started counting down from 5, inching my way closer to him. The guy took off and ran to his car, which was parked a few yards away from where we were, and I gave chase, making sure he left. I beat on the side of his car until he pulled off, and hauled ass away. I tried to get his license plate number to report it to the cops, but there wasn't one, at least not a visible one that I saw. I then offered to walk the kids home. It was a little off from my house, but I was willing to take a side trip to make sure they were okay. It turns out that 2 of the boys were brothers, and I dropped them off at their house and told their mother what had happened. She thanked me and I told her to call the cops when she got the chance. I'd then take the other kid home who lived in a somewhat sketchy neighborhood, but it wasn't as bad as some others I'd been to or seen. Anyways, I get the feeling that we were being followed, and I was right. The same man, either by pure coincidence or stalking, ended up following us in his car. He wasn't directly behind us, only a few yards away, but he was still following us. I took the boy to his house and, like a dumbass, forgot all about the man until he knocked me to the ground. He was clearly going for the kid and trying to grab him and run away. I grabbed the man's ankle, making him trip, and screamed for the kid to go get help. Me and the man started fighting it out, and he was stronger than I expected. He pushed me to the ground again and pinned me, and then he tried reaching into my pocket and grabbed my pocket knife. I fought like hell trying to get him off of me, but he was too heavy. Just as if on cue, the cops pulled the man off of me and put him in the cop car. One of the officers asked me some questions and asked if I was alright and if I would like to take a ride home. I accepted because I was tired after what had just happened and didn't feel like walking. The kid's mom, who I assumed called the cops, thanked me and asked if I was alright. I told her that I was fine and that I was just thankful she had called the cops. I told my mom the story the next day about what had happened, and she was thankful that I was alright. She hugged and kissed me, as well as cried a little bit after I told her I was okay. I soon found out that the man was in prison. My first thought was, good, he deserves to rot for what he did, and what he was going to do. Apparently, this had not been his first crime, nor his first act of child molestation. No, I should say I'm not a big fan of kids. If you asked me if I wanted kids, I would probably say no, but that doesn't mean I would want any harm done to them. So to the man and any sick fucks trying to prey on kids in the park, you better make sure we don't meet, for your sake and for mine. This happened a little while ago. I was 19 years old, living in New York alone with a small dog. I had already lived there a year and was fairly used to the strange people of the city. I never felt uncomfortable really, especially when I was out with my dog. I was attending college classes, and so my schedule was basically the same every day. I would take my dog to the dog park at about noon daily, and Dad would stay for 2 hours. Something you should know is that New York City dog people are pretty weird. In the dog park, people tend not to respect the basic social interaction rules. I had been going to this dog park, same time, almost daily for about 2 months. I knew almost everyone there, yet there was always one old man with his 2 dogs that never talked to anyone. I actually liked this guy a bit more than the other people. He minded his own business, and I never got any bad feelings about him. Until one day, when he got up to leave the dog park, and on his way out started talking to me. I can't recall exactly the entire conversation. All I know is that I was very, very uncomfortable almost immediately. He told me a lot about himself, how he had a son my age. He talked about his son a lot, telling me all of his accomplishments and how he never picked good girlfriends. I assumed it was just a dad who was proud of his son and missed him a lot. Somehow, though, the entire conversation turned to him trying to convince me that I should have children one day. He asked a few red flag questions, such as where I was living and whether or not I had a boyfriend. I lied, saying I lived with my dad and brother on a street a little away from where I actually lived. Although the interaction made me somewhat uncomfortable, I tried not to think much of it. I had dealt with people like him numerous times in New York City, and the dog park was going to be closed next week for renovations, so I wouldn't have to see him for a while. Now, there was another dog park I visited when my normal one was closed. However, this week, I chose to just walk the dog around the city instead, so I wasn't visiting any of the dog parks in the area. A week later, my normal dog park is open, so I decided to go back, even though this man was still in the back of my head. As I walk towards the gate, I see him. He immediately smiles and runs over. All I could think was, shit, this guy again? He tells me that he's been looking for me all over the past week, and that he even checked my other dog park every day waiting for me. Wait, how did he know about the other dog park I went to? Thank God I hadn't been there. He also tells me he walked down the street I lied about living on in an attempt to find me. At first, I was polite. No need to piss off some random creepy old guy. He then goes on to say, though, that he has a gift for me, and pulls a CD out of his coat. He tells me that this is his most cherished CD, and goes into detail describing it as very erotic and passionate music. Then I'm told that I have to listen to it in a dark room, with my eyes closed, and let the music change me. At this point I'm pretty weirded out, and decided it would be best to get out of the situation. But he just kept talking. He mostly focused on telling me about orchestra music, something I have absolutely no interest in, and made that pretty clear. But suddenly, he has yet another gift for me. He pulls a note card with his name, cell phone number, and email on it. He then pulls out a second blank note card, and asks the same of me. I told him that I don't give out personal information, but he just gave me a cold stare for about a minute. He explained that from where I said I lived, there was a bus that came by at a specific time. He told me to get on that bus Saturday, and that he would do the same since it went past him, and we could go to an orchestra museum together. I rejected this idea completely. I explained I didn't have time, nor did I feel comfortable doing this. Again, a blank stare for about a minute, and no words. I told him I was leaving now and to have a nice day. He then just whispered under his breath, "I think I found my son's wife." What the fuck? I stared at him and just asked what he meant. He just smiled and told me to have a nice day, and that he'd see me tomorrow with another CD. I listened to the CD later. It's about 6 hours of strange orchestral music. I still have the CD, and I've never been back to that dog park since. When I was younger, I lived in the suburbs of Chicago with my parents and little sister at my grandparents' house. We used to be a close family, always getting together for birthdays, Thanksgiving, Christmas, and all that, until they all became money hungry and held grudges against family members who couldn't get the money back to them right away. My story takes place on March 28th, 2000. My family and some family friends gathered to my grandparents' house for my dad's 30th birthday. It was a surprise party. I sometimes hated when we had family gatherings, because everyone always asked to see how my front teeth were growing. I don't remember exactly why, but I had to get my 4 top teeth pulled out when I was real little. Everyone thought it was cute because I'd always sing "All I Want for Christmas is my 4 front teeth." A couple of hours into the party, my sister and my cousins, they weren't really my cousins, just family friends that I've known since I was a year old, and I started to get a bit bored. We couldn't play my Nintendo because everyone was in the basement drinking and playing games, and watching whatever game was on at the time. We asked our parents if we could go to the park that started right down the street, but the best part of the park was about a 4-minute walk away. They were hesitant at first since it was already dark, but they said we could go for an hour as long as my cousin Steven, who was 12 at the time, would watch us and make sure nothing happened to us. At the park, we all started off playing on the swings, competing as to who could swing higher. My cousin Steven had a late start because he had to push my little sister to get her going. We quickly got bored of that game and decided to play what every awesome kid has played: Lava. We kind of mixed it up a bit and added Shark Attack in there as well. A little bit after we started playing, a guy who looked about my dad's age strolled into the park on a bicycle. He started to talk to us, but my big brave cousin told him that we weren't allowed to talk to strangers. The man had told us that he was just with my cousin's parents, and that he only came here to check up on us and hang around to make sure nothing happened to us. I didn't remember seeing the guy at the party, but we listened to him anyway. I figured he came to the party a little after we left. He asked what we were playing, and we said Lava and Shark Attack. He gave a weird smile and said, "My favorite games." This guy would always want to be the shark, and he'd grab my sister, my cousin Michelle, and I, and pick us up and spin us around. Of course, we didn't think anything of it because he knew our parents. After playing for a while, he told us that he was getting bored, and he asked if we wanted to come play at his house. He said that he had a Nintendo and a PlayStation. We told him that we would have to go ask our parents, because we were only supposed to be at the park for an hour. He told us that that was fine, but we could play a bit longer if we wanted to, which of course we did. Right in the middle of playing Shark Attack and him grabbing my sister, a car pulled up to the gates of the park, and I heard someone scream in Polish. Then a "what the hell is going on here?" in English. I saw my dad and my cousin's dad jump out of the car, and they started yelling at the guy who had already hopped on his bike and started to take off. My cousins, my sister, and I were all dragged to the car by our parents, with them yelling at us in English and in Polish, asking what we were thinking. And they started to yell even more when we told them that the guy had said he knew them, and that's why we were playing with him. 9 years later, I found a website for registered sex offenders. I looked up all the sex offenders around my area where I live now in Indiana, and around all my friends' houses. After I was done with that, I looked them up by my grandparents' place. There was a sex offender literally 3 houses down from my grandparents' house. It was the guy from the park. I don't remember what the charges were for, but it's so scary to think that he could have kidnapped one of us and ruined our lives. What's up, guys? Blue Spooky here, as always. I just wanted to thank you guys so much for watching, especially if you made it this far to the end of the video. If you guys liked the video, please feel free to leave a comment below, or leave a like and share if you feel so inclined. If you have any stories you'd like me to read, or you'd like to contact me, you can go ahead and take a look in the description, where there will be links to my Gmail, Twitter, and Facebook accounts. Go ahead and send me a message on any of those, and I'll try to include your story in a video as soon as possible. If you do decide to send in a story, please feel free to include in the tagline how you'd like to be credited in the description of the video in which your story appears, as well as the theme of the story, if there is any. If you guys are curious about the music in the video, music is always listed in the description of the video in the order of which it appears, and there will be links to the artists as well. So if you're curious about the music, you can go ahead and check down there in the description. If you guys have any constructive criticism, please feel free to leave it in the comments below, as I'm always looking for new ways to improve the channel. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I hope you guys have a great day.